you've trained to ride 100 miles. You're sitting down on your bike anyway. You might as well be sitting on your saddle pedaling as opposed to sitting in a chair going nowhere. But the pacing part is really, really important. And I think that can make or break a lot of people's races. And it certainly does every year.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. On this show, we take a look at how Leadville has dealt with a touchy subject for some, pacing. Now, Fatty and I have both done it, but we're going to talk with six-time winner of the Leadville 100, Dave Wiens, about this issue. And in our questions for the Queen, we ask Rebecca Rusch about food, logistics, bottles, Camelbaks, food, wrappers. Where do you put it for easy access? And how do you manage it when your heart is going fast and your brain is going slow, if at all?
Yeah, you got to be smart before the race because you are for sure going to be stupid during the race. And our core segment needs just one word: Powerline. Hottie, put some ominous music, maybe a thunderclap under that word when this show's in post, please. And Coach Jonathan Lee is going to be ramping up your workouts, planning out your week for a proper build to the second Saturday in August, just 8 weeks from now.
I'm Michael Houghton. Some people call me Hottie, 6-time attendee, 5-time starter, 4-time finisher of the Leadville Trail 100. You're also hearing Eldon Fatty Nelson, who is going for his 21st Leadville Trail 100 finish. Hey, did you know he is one of 8 people in the world to complete the LT 100 20 times?
Yeah, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm a slow learner, but I am part of a pretty cool little group of people who can say we've raced the LT 100 for 2,000 miles or more. That's in order. Actually, I don't know if it's in order. John Callahan, Todd Murray, Roger Mankus, Sean Gillis, Jeff Leanhout, Ricky McDonald, Scott Ellis, and me. By the way, nobody new is joining the 2,000-mile club this year, so this is not going to be a fast-growing club.
Hey, maybe not the big names in the sport of mountain biking,
Nope.
but certainly the consistent ones. I mean, Ricky always comes to mind. I think Eldon Fatty Nelson is a guy people would recognize outside of this podcast, too. So quite an elite group.
I'm super famous.
Yeah, eight of you in the entire mountain biking world. Pretty amazing. Fatty, I went for a sturdy training ride the other day. 7,000 feet of climbing in the heat on the cross bike. I was worked, but got straight off the bike and straight into recovery the next day. I was good to go for a little more climbing and some speed by Sunday morning. And it got me thinking about your week of madness coming into August. You got that 6 days of Breck Epic, and on the 7th day, you will not rest. You will race the Leadville Trail 100. So give us your recovery strategy, because that will be key for even making it to the 6th and Harrison on August 11th.
Strategy. I don't need no stinking strategy. Back in January, when I decided to do the Breck Leadville double, I called Coach Jonathan Lee on this podcast every episode and asked him how I should train in order to do well at both of these events. And he actually just laughed at me. He really did. So my recovery strategy is kind of simple. After each day on the Breck Epic, I'll get home, have a recovery drink, put my feet up, and watch Judge Judy, which is the single most effective and certain prescription in the world for taking a nap. I will eat mild food, and I will eat small portions but frequently, because I am unable to get a lot of food down for hours after I do a big race like that. It takes a while for my stomach to settle down. Then I go to bed early every night because as Jonathan Vaughters told me last year when he was coaching me, sleeping is the single best thing in the world for recovery and for training. Got to get as much sleep as you possibly can, and he hammered that home over and over. So also, another thing I'm doing is piling on races closer together. I'm going to be doing a local race called the 5,000 Feet of Freedom on July 4th, just a couple days before I go and do the Silver Rush, which I signed up for this morning.
You've added stuff now. Terrific. So Silver Rush, Crusher, Breck Epic, Leadville.
Yeah, I figure let's have an active summer, right? Yeah, so my idea here, the reason I'm piling those on, well, there's twofold. Part of it is to get used to racing tired. My body is going to be able to recover however much it can recover, right? And it's my brain, really, that I'm trying to train now. So it needs to get used to this amount of training, this feeling of racing cooked, of having dead legs and still going, not giving up. I think that's going to make a big difference in whether I have a great time or a miserable time at Leadville, as well as other races. And I really do want to have a great time. That's my top objective for all races this year. Hottie, I know you're actually a lot more studious and thoughtful about things like this than I am. So what advice would you give me?
Yeah, well, I like the sleeping thing. I wish I was a better sleeper. Golf, by the way. Just start watching golf. If Judge Judy's not on it, you can find any golf. It'll put you right to sleep. A stretching routine. When I got into stretching and got a stretching routine, my recovery and my muscle soreness went down. Hydration, I think you've mentioned that already. Mm-hmm. I think that's an obvious one, but really you got to put fluids back in you because you really lose much more than you could put in on the bike. And here's another one I used a lot, especially not so much in training, but anytime you're trying to recover quickly, back-to-back events, events that are consecutive days, ice baths. I love ice baths. They make you feel good. The jury's kind of out on whether or not they help you from a build standpoint, but no doubt they can make you feel better quicker. They can take a lot of the pain away. They relax you. Some people have a hard time jumping into a bathtub full of ice. I never did. I found them relaxing, cooling, calming, and they really help with the muscle soreness. So ice baths are something I employ all the time, especially when I'm doing events that are consecutive days in a row.
Yeah.
The Leadville podcast, everybody, is brought to you by Shimano. Shift early, shift often. When it comes to changes in terrain, that is the mantra of mountain biking. And Fatty, with the right drivetrain on your side, shift early, shift often is no problem.
Oh, yeah, that is so true, Hottie. One thing we keep hearing from every expert we've talked to in this podcast, including the nutrition expert we talked to a couple of weeks ago, the blood and oxygen expert we talked with last week, Rebecca Rusch has talked about this multiple times, and we'll actually be hearing this from Dave Wiens too. You just do not want to be going and burning matches that you don't have. The thing is, on the Leadville course, it is super easy to burn match after match after match, clearing little rises or powering up when an easy climb becomes a hard climb, or when you want to pass someone. All of those are easy places to go into the red zone when you honestly don't need to. And so this year, I'm making a concerted effort in my training to stay in the right gear by making really frequent shifts. It's an adjustment because of my single speed mentality, but I'm having an easier time with it than I otherwise would because I am using Shimano XT Di2 for my shifting. I've set it up so it does very fast shifting, and I can do unlimited shifts, just press and hold, and I can go all the way up or all the way down the cassette. And I can get into the right gear for the moment so easily under pretty much any load. I'm burning fewer matches with XT Di2. And just a little side note, I like the way it beeps when I'm at the top or bottom of the cassette, so I don't go looking for that magical bonus miracle gear that honestly just is not there.
That's right. Go to bike.shimano.com for more on XT Di2 and all their great products. We will also have a link at Leadville100podcast.com. And now on to the course. Each show we are discussing a segment of the Leadville Out and Back. We are doing the course in order. So just go back to, if you haven't heard the course so far, go back to episode 1, start at the start line with Fatty and I, and we'll work you right through to our segment for today. You're now down from the starting line over St. Kevin's, down the May Queen Road, and in show number 4, we blasted onto Hagerman, some people say Hagerman Pass Road, made the left onto the Sugarloaf climb, that's Fatty and I's favorite, and took it to where the massive electrical towers come into view.
Oh, yeah. And, that seems like a lot of racing. It seems like way more than just that 20% of a race that you have actually done. And those power lines are humming and can be a little bit of scary, especially if the weather is a little bit rainy. You hear them sizzle. But here we are, 19 miles in, and at one of the most loved/hated segments of the Leadville 100, the power line. But before we get into interpreting what is, in the end, just your first dirt downhill of the day, let's get into the facts of this part of the race.
Yeah, so you're at the second highest point of the race when you begin your descent down Powerline, right at about 11,000 feet. So you'll be feeling the altitude as those rollers start rolling downhill. The Powerline is not that long either. It's about a 4-mile drop, a total of 1,400 feet.
Yeah, it's not a huge descent. And the objective amount of time that you're spending isn't that huge either. I was curious, so I looked it up on Strava, and on race days, I take between 13 and 17 minutes to do this 4-mile segment. And I guarantee you that with the scores of people that pass me during the descent, a lot of people are doing it in much closer to 10 minutes. Just sort of as a interesting factoid, I see that the KOM for the Powerline descent is 7 minutes, Hottie. Do you know what your time is on that?
Powerline, no. I try not to obsess about descent speeds or times too much. Just let them happen.
That's wise. Yeah, let them happen. Don't rush, because you kind of want to keep the rubber side down, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah. I like to break down Powerline into kind of 2 descents. The top is rocky. There are both loose and embedded rocks up there. Lots of sharp, rocky dips that might be dry or might have some water to slosh through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're in the trees a lot there. If it's a bright day, you'll be getting a lot of that stippling effect in your eyes as you go through those trees. And you had a tip with dealing with that, didn't you, Hottie?
Well, first of all, when you're on race day, I don't expect a glare because the sun will still be low out of the east, and you're kind of riding eastbound at this point. You'll have glare and you'll have dust. So it makes it really difficult to see. The sunlight in the top section will beam through the tree limbs and at times blind you as you come around a corner. So be ready for that. Here's my other little Hottie tip. Definitely you want to go out and ride Powerline if you have a day to do it. Mm-hmm. But what I'd advise folks to do is get up early on that training day and ride it at the same time of day you think you'll be going down it on race day.
Oh, that is a great idea. I don't know if I have ever done that, but yeah, the light and the way it kind of flashes into your eyes as you're going through those evergreens, it definitely is distracting, especially if it is the first time you have done it. So as you're doing this on race day, this first little bit has sort of a resorting effect on the field, right? The good climbers have had a lot of chances to get out in front during the day. And now you've got a big descent where the great descenders are having their moment. And that's all good. Everyone's good at different things in this race. And very few of us are competing against anything besides a time objective. So in other words, if you're one of the fast descenders, show some kindness to people like me who are nervous in these kinds of descents. Call out your passes clearly and with the recognition that we are at altitude. Remember, we were at 11,000 feet seconds ago. And so we are not smart at the moment. Don't make a pass if you can't do it cleanly and safely for both you and for the person that you're passing.
And, of course, the flip side of this is true as well. Fatty, people who aren't comfortable going downhill need to be listening for folks coming from behind and help them out. Move to a side, holler out to that person behind you to come by. Because at its best, the Leadville 100 is a cooperative ride. Now, the second half of the descent is sketchy for different reasons. It's a loose soil you'll be riding on, generally well-packed, but with a little layer of sandy, kind of gravelly, decomposed granite on top. So keep your speed in check here because sliding out is a distinct possibility.
Yeah, it truly is. And that's just half of the high-speed puzzle of Powerline, right? There are numerous erosion ruts in this second part. And if you are not looking ahead and plotting out what you're going to be doing in the next 10 seconds, not just in the next 1 second, you can find yourself sort of squeezed into a bad line by a deep trench that practically forces you off the trail. And if that happens, you have to get off the bike. That's fine. Don't sweat it. It's happened to hundreds of people, including me. But you can avoid it by focusing forward instead of just 10 feet ahead of you. Look, 10 seconds ahead of you, and you're going to be a lot better off.
So we should probably talk here about the twin dangers of Powerline, crashing and flatting.
Yeah. The best advice I can give is don't do either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, Fatty. Very helpful.
That's the objective of riding a bike. Don't crash, don't flat.
But you do see a lot of people on the side of the trail every year, and they're tending to a flat or tending to an injury. I've seen a guy actually endo right in front of me when passing beyond his ability, and I've seen well north of 100 people. I would guess 200 people in my 20 years of doing this with flats on this section of the race over the years. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things to avoid, help you avoid crashing and flatting here. Well, I'll go ahead and let you start with those, Hottie.
Well, let's first start with the crashing, which is probably the scariest part. There actually used to be a lot more of this at Leadville, but the course is so popular to pre-ride before the race now that on race day, the best and cleanest line is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Ride within your ability, you'll be okay. Yeah. And adding to that, the descent down Powerline is a really good section of the course to have pre-ridden if you get a chance to come to Leadville in the weeks or days before the race. Ride it up to understand the climb, then ride down to get comfortable with that proper line, the good line of that descent.
Yeah, and it really will be obvious. You're not going to have to be picking the best line. You just go ahead and do the line that hundreds and thousands of people have done. Not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of people.
I mean, wouldn't you say in general, stay out of the rut? As you get to that lower section, though, the upper section's rocky, and you're going to be picking a line like you would in a traditional single track section that you might ride at home. It's that lower section that has, I think, a more obvious cue that we should be giving. That is, stay out of the ruts.
Yep, stay out of the ruts. And for me, a little tip, don't spend a lot of time looking at that rut. I have a tendency to go to what I am looking at. So if I'm looking at something I want to avoid, there is sort of a gravity well effect, and I will find myself in it. So look at the line that you want to be in, and don't get obsessed with that rut, regardless of which direction it happens to be taking you to.
Yeah, and get comfortable with a little sliding. There's going to be a little sliding on Powerline, especially on that lower section. Now, Fatty, you've had things go wrong for you on the Powerline, no?
I have. I once endoed while coming down the Powerline. It was my second year of racing Leadville. I had unimaginably good luck, though. I stepped out and over my bars as I went over, somehow managed to unclip and landed on my feet. I don't think I could ever repeat that again in my life. I certainly am not going to try, but I had good luck that one time.
You're a genuine acrobat. That is incredible. And we're going to put you in the circus next. Now, pinch flatting is also a real concern on this course, on this particular part of the course.
Yeah.
With all the embedded rocks you're hitting at high speed. Again, those are mostly on the upper section of Powerline. Avoiding pinch flats really depends on two things: choosing your wheels, tires, and pressure carefully, and choosing your line.
Yeah. So I kind of want to do a weird transition here to the sponsor for a second, if that's all right with you, Hottie. I mean,
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
The fact is, Envy's, of course, one of our sponsors, and this is kind of their wheelhouse, as it were. And so I just going to Envy, this is sponsored, but it's also true. I used to pinch flat all the time. I think most of us did back in the days of tubes, but I haven't pinch flatted in years. I seriously can't remember the last time I did. Part of that is tires. I use Specialized Fast Track Control for whatever that's worth. Part of that is the miracle world of tubeless tires that we all pinch flat much, much less often than we used to. But I think Envy is the biggest part of the whole equation, for me at least. Both the Hammer and I are riding Envy M525 wheels this year. They have these wide hookless bead rims that really do the trick here. Envy has this wide leading edge, and this big surface makes a nice forgiving platform. The tire can bottom out on the rim without cutting through it. And that's the whole point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that M525 rim, that's something Envy has put even more. I mean, they've had hookless speeds before, but the M525 takes it up a notch for them. That means that the risk of pinch flat has been even dropped down even more for any Envy rim. You can ride now with lower pressures because of that, which gives you a better traction and, of course, improved rolling resistance.
Which is nice on that sort of decomposed granite, the little slick sort of beads that you're riding on coming down the Powerline. Now, I weigh, I'm a little overweight still, 167 pounds. And I am still running with 19 pounds in front, 20 in the back. My wife, the Hammer, is running 18 in front, 19 in the back. We haven't, either of us, had a single pinch flat the entire year so far. And those are the pressures that I'm planning to ride at Leadville, including down the Powerline.
And I'm gathering you have not broken an Envy rim so far this year at any time, because they have that legendary build quality and strength. They build the wheels about an hour from where you live, Fatty, in Ogden, Utah.
Yep, I visited the factory a couple of times. Very cool what they are doing there. And they're not cheap wheels, obviously, right? But which also means they are not cheap wheels in the bad way. I do remember a couple of years ago, Rebecca Rusch and I were doing a clinic on Leadville and pre-riding the Powerline downhill. And she cracked a carbon rim while coming down the Powerline during that clinic. And I can just say that was before she had Envy as a wheel sponsor. And nowadays, she, like me, does not ride any wheels but Envy. Maybe a little lesson to learn there.
Learn more about the complete M Series lineup at envy.com. That's ENVE.com. Fatty, let's get back to the last little bit of Powerline. Along with those ruts, the trail gets super steep for the final minute or so before you do a banked left-hander, blast down a straight fence line, and then you're at the famed creek crossing that you see in the Leadville movies.
Yeah, except it's gone now, which is, is it a shame or is it a good thing? I'm going to go with good thing. They put a pipe under the ground and now it's just a dirt road, which I'm going to say I'm happy for. Some changes are good. I just don't want a squeaky chain for the next 77 miles of this race. And that puts you on a quick uphill right-hand turn onto pavement. Lots of cheering folks there. And take a big deep breath, because with any luck, you've just gotten down the Powerline unscathed. You're 23 miles into this race, just 80 more to go. And I did not make a mistake with my math. Remember, it's 103 miles.
And on the next installment of the course, you'll find out about the best opportunity you'll have in the entire race to go fast while working smart.
It is your women's champion, Rebecca Rusch, from Ketchum, Idaho. Welcome back, Rebecca.
Okay, Fatty, the four-time champ Rebecca Rusch standing by. Time for questions for the Queen.
Reba, thanks so much for answering some more questions for the Queen.
Happy to do it.
I want to ask you some questions today about being smart before the race, because you know you're going to be dumb during the race. I learned a trick from you years ago, what I now call gel management for dummies. I keep my gels in my unopened gels in my right pocket, my used wrappers in my left, because that makes it very easy to, I don't have to go fishing to find a full gel packet. And it also makes it very easy for my crew. They always know, empty the left pocket, put new stuff in the right pocket. And it's very easy.
You get really stupid up at that kind of altitude with that kind of effort. And yeah, it seems ridiculous now in the comfort of your own home talking about that stuff. But that is the stuff that makes a good versus a frustrating, transition.
Plan everything.
Yeah.
The things that are simple and silly, plan them anyway.
Your crew will appreciate it.
Yes, they do, and we will have a whole episode on on how to work with your crew and how your crew can work with you.
Yes.
That's right. But so that's how you work as far as getting your gels, and of course do you use a Camelbak or do you use bottles?
I use a combination of Camelbak and bottles in Leadville. I really like to start with a small Camelbak because the race is so hectic. And I want to talk about delivery system. And it's great to have in your pockets all the best, best planned out plan. But if you don't actually reach in and do it and put it in your mouth, it doesn't really matter how well you plan at home. You could have a beautiful spreadsheet like Brian Vaughn, but if it doesn't go in the hole, on your face, then it doesn't really matter. And so I do use a Camelbak for the first leg because it's really crowded, it's really hectic, it's very intense. And honestly, it's really hard for me to reach down and grab a water bottle.
Right.
It's just that effort is too hard. And I don't want to get behind I feel like nutritionally, the first leg, the first 2 hours of the race is really important to set you up for the rest, for hour 7, 8, 9, whatever. And I feel like that's where most people make their mistake, is in that first 2 hours. They feel good, they're amped, there's a ton of people around, they're charging, and they're not drinking anything. And they get to the first aid station and they're like, oh, no, I don't need anything. Everything's still full. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
And if you got there like that, you blew it.
Yep,
you've already right on it.
Yep, you dug a hole and climbed into it.
Yeah, you did. You're inside your hole already. And so I use a Camelbak for the first leg because I just drink more often. If that tube is right there by my face, I'll put it in my mouth. I take little sips, and it actually works really well. And then I make a point of really policing myself. So then I'll chuck that Camelbak and I go to bottles for some of the rest of the race. But I have a Camelbak and I have bottles ready. And so if you feel like one or the other, you can do one or the other.
Sure.
If you go bottles only, you better be pretty fast.
You need to be good at getting to them, no question.
You need to be a fast racer. One, you need to be adept enough to grab bottles on the fly and drink from them and do it when you're tired. But 3, if you can fit 3 bottles, 2 in your bike and 1 in your back pocket, and that's what I take, you need to be doing a 9-ish hour race to be able to have enough fluid to get between aid stations.
Right.
Twin Lakes and what's the first one? I'm spacing on the names.
Pipeline, then there's Twin Lakes, and there's Columbine.
Yeah, Pipeline and Twin Lakes, that's not very far between those.
No.
But the other stretches are quite long. And so you need more bottles. So if your timing is on more the 12-hour range, you really might need a Camelbak to carry more capacity. So you need to plan out how many hours you think it's going to take you between aid stations and make your decision based on that.
Yep. And once again, you figure all of that out during your training, not during the race itself. And one last thing that I will want to add to what you're saying, whether you use a Camelbak or bottles or whatever you have, make sure that you are good at getting to what you have. Don't buy a Camelbak for this race only to discover that you were also planning to keep your gels in your jersey pocket, and now because of this new Camelbak, you can't get to your gels easily. You need to be comfortable with and experienced in using whatever your food delivery equipment is going to be. You need to be good at it and comfortable with it and experienced with it.
Food delivery is really important. And, Revelate, there's all sorts of things you can get to attach to your bike. Revelate Designs makes some cool ones. I use this little trough sort of thing a lot now that sits next to your stem and your handlebar. And it's just like basically it's a little feed bag, and
Right.
you can drop a water bottle in there. You can drop some gels in there. Water bottle cages are another thing to think about. If you buy these new cool carbon cages and you can't get your bottle out because it's so tight, that's super annoying. Or if it's too loose that the bottles jump out of there
Right.
on a descent. And so really trying out the way you're going to get to your things is really important. And there's so much good gear out there right now. You can put stuff on the bike, on your body, in your pockets. A lot of people don't like race jersey pockets anymore. It's for that reason that you mentioned with the Camelbak.
Sure.
And so there's other ways to get little attachments where your food is accessible. And that's the main thing. You never want to put your food inside the body of the Camelbak.
Yeah.
Because that just means you're not going to stop. You're not going to eat it because you've got to stop and get it out.
And that's
so
frustrating.
the Camelbak is just for fluids, maybe a jacket and maybe your repair. your bike repair stuff, but it's not for your nutrition. That goes right at the ready, like somewhere that your hands can get on it.
Yep. And I guess really the final point that we both would have on that is whatever you're going to use, now is the time to get and experiment with and make your decisions on so that you can be comfortable with and experienced at using them.
Yeah, and the bonk also, we I'll say this again, you're in the driver's seat here, and the dreaded bonk is what we're all trying to avoid with really good race nutrition. We're trying to feel good and feel energetic and give ourselves, the calories that we need, and avoid the dreaded bonk. And we've all had it. You can come out of it. It's a horrible feeling. You can recover from it, but the deal is it doesn't go away on its own. It's up to you to manage that if you do get there. Prevention's the best medicine, but if you get there, you can pull yourself out. So your race is not over if you bonk. You just need to slow down and get the calories back in and kind of, dig yourself out of that hole. Yep.
It's work, but it can be done. Reba, it is always so educational to listen to you and learn from your experience. I tell you, I still do. I mean, I've done this race. I mean, there are people who had not been born who are now doing this race the first time I did this race.
All this stuff we're talking about, keep in mind, everyone who's listening, you can take this to, Leadville is a very unique event, but this goes for all of your races and all of your big rides. So when you nail this stuff, the nutrition and all that, it really just opens the doors for you to do more on your bike and go do bigger and better things.
Yep. You're opening the door to endless adventures, and that's kind of what you're doing now. Reba, thanks so much for answering some questions for the Queen.
Thanks, Fatty.
Yeah, Hottie, obviously I'm a real Reba disciple. I've patterned my eating, my drinking logistics after Reba's, but no doubt you have some techniques and tips that have worked or have not worked for you. How are you eating when you do endurance races? Where do you grab stuff? What works for you, what doesn't when you're keeping your food close at hand on long rides?
Yeah, well, specific to Leadville, because, again, like a lot of people said, the race is so hyped up, you're hyped up, your mind is not clear, you get stupid at altitude. You got to make eating and drinking a habit, instinctual. And another thing I used to do is play a little game with myself, especially at Leadville. I would make not only making my splits a goal, but make finishing bottles a goal. Like I would look down and go, got to finish that bottle. Got to drink that bottle by the time I get to the pipeline feed station. Got to finish that goo, that pocket of gels by the time I get to Twin Lakes. So I'd make little games out of it as I moved along. Now, some specifics here with bottle cages. We talked a little about bottle cages. I like the side-loading cages. Yeah. I ended up using those most of the time. They both held well, but they were easy to get bottles in and out of, especially the taller bottles. So it was easy to flick those guys in and out. I was on the Camelbak guy at Leadville but so my bottle cages, like Reba said, I made sure they worked. I made sure they held bottles, but they didn't hold them too tight. I couldn't get them out. One of the hard bits about riding off-road and eating is going into your pockets. You're jostling around, so getting food out of your pockets can be difficult. First of all, in training, I would always work on this. Instead of stopping and talking with my training partner about, how's our ride going? Having a little Cliff Bar, blah, blah, blah. No. Go over your climb as you're descending or going to your next thing or you've got your spot to eat. Go into your pockets. Practice the eating on the fly. It's different. When you're riding, you're breathing harder. It's harder to chew. It's harder to wash things down like solid foods. You kind of got to get used to what that's about. I do the little squirrel effect, Fatty. I call it being a squirrel. I take a Cliff Bar or bonk break or whatever it is. I bite off half of it. I put it in the side of my cheek and just gnaw on it. Like I have a chewing tobacco in there. It looks really bizarre. But that way you can kind of slowly eat that thing. Another thing I do, and I don't know why other people saw me doing this, like, wow, that's so smart. I cut off, I pre-open all my packaged food. Mm-hmm. I tear it. Yeah, it means it's going to be ruined. Yeah, it could be ruined, but I would cut off the tops. Like I love the Cliff Blocks. I'd always cut the tops of those off. So I didn't have to wrestle with trying to tear things open. Same with a Cliff Bar or bonk breaker bar. I open the top up, just open it up. So all I have to do is slide it out and I can eat it. Homemade sandwiches are another deal. I have a specific way of folding foil around those that make them easy, really simple to open. But again, you just want to get used to all this beforehand, before you go into the event.
Yep.
You got to practice eating. It sounds so funny, but you really want to practice eating and drinking. I agree with Reba. I think if I were to do the event again right now, I think my future endurance events will involve either a half frame bag or a top tube bag of some sort. I think that actually makes a lot of sense, and I could see myself doing that in the future.
Yeah. And I am curious. So you side load your cages. Do you side load so you get to them on the left or the right?
I'm a righty. Yeah. I grab on the right side. That's how I answered your Facebook thing. You asked that on Facebook. That's
right.
what I said. Right-handed.
Yeah. And that makes great sense. I just wanted to bring it up because I recently switched over to the left. The reason being, I wanted to always be able to grab my right brake if I needed to. And
the back brake. You want to grab the back brake. Okay.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And plus with the XTDI2, all of my shifting is happening on my right side. So I've got plenty of action going on with my right hand. My left hand, all it ever does with the way things are set up on my Epic is hold. Front brake, which I certainly don't want to grab a handful of unless I've got some back brake going on. But otherwise, it just helps steer. So it's much more, likely that I'm going to need in an emergency to do something with my right hand than with my left. So just a thought, maybe get used to trying the side loaders on your left side. But anyway, a couple of extra little tips. I keep one gel tucked under each leg of my shorts because while I'm usually happy to grab from my right jersey pocket, I use the ones that I grab from under my leg when I need to be very fast, if I need to get something very quick, if a climb or a descent is coming up really soon. The hammer, meanwhile, uses an old tri-trick. She uses a bento box on her top tube. Vanity keeps me from putting one of those on a mountain bike, but you know what? They work for her, and having stuff work for you is what is important. It has a little Velcro lid strap thing or magnet strap thing that makes it so that stuff doesn't go tumbling out and have a grocery yard sale on the way down the mountain. And then finally, while I've been sort of a hydration pack hater for a long time, since I've been using this new full suspension bike with a kind of tighter front triangle, I'm giving hydration packs another shot. I just bought a USWE, maybe it's pronounced USWE, I don't know, hydration pack. I like the way that it is strapped. It straps very high and it stays centered on my back and I can still get to my jersey pockets. I've also got a Camelbak chase pack, the kind that Yuri Housewall designed and then used in the DKXL on order. I'll get back to you, all of you, with info on how I like them and how they work for an event like this.
Mm-hmm. If you have questions for the Queen, leave us a comment at Leadville100podcast.com. Tweet with the hashtag Leadville100podcast or just call or text us old-fashioned. Well, at least the calling part. 719-453-1514.
Yeah, and texting is pretty old-fashioned too, right? I mean, it's been around for how long?
Getting there.
10, 15
archaic.
Years? Yeah. Well, anyway, quick plug for Rebecca. As the winner of the recent 350-mile Dirty Kansas XL, she is obviously in full possession of the brawn and brains to go the distance. She is sharing that wisdom at her new Rusch Academy camps. There's a gravel version and there is a mountain bike version. And you'll ride with and learn from Rebecca Rusch. Learn more at RebeccaRusch.com and make sure you put a C before that final H in RebeccaRusch.com.
Fatty, when I was on a big training ride the other day, I saw a sandwich I'm going to try in the future. It is peanut butter, honey, and pickles. The PBH&P. It's got it all. Carbs, fats, protein, salt, and that secret anti-cramp elixir, cucumbers soaked in vinegar, picklings. If the sound of that kind of grosses you out, but the breakdown intrigues you, well, chances are you can get all those ingredients in separate form, of course, from our good friends at The Feed, starting, Fatty, with the item you have fallen for, pickle juice.
Yeah, I am intrigued by this sandwich you're describing. Do you happen to know what kind of pickles? Was it more of a dill or like a sweet pickle? Or
I just saw pickles.
Okay. I think that I would be good with that if it was a sweet pickle. I'm not sure. Well, it demands investigation. But anyway, I have had good luck with nipping cramps in the bud with pickle juice shots, right? They are strong. I mean, those shots are strong, I should say. they're way stronger than the pickle juice you get from a jar, whether it's hamburger type slices or the much stronger dill. I'm getting the pickle juice shots from the feed, and in fact, I'm getting everything I need nutrition-wise for all my races and for training from the feed. You know, the Leadville race day packs and the Leadville training packs each have a pickle juice shot in them, as well as all the Goo Roctane gel, the Morton's drink that you and I are both really digging on, and basically everything you need to have a successful long day in the saddle. Seriously, no guesswork for your race day food plan. It's what I'm using both for training and for racing, both for Breck Epic and for the Leadville 100. And I dare say for the Crusher and the Tusher and for the Silver Rush and et cetera, et cetera.
All of the above. Yeah, we've talked a lot this show about practicing your nutrition, practicing eating. We'll start by heading over to the feed. Get your packet, stuff it in your pockets, give it a go. And our podcast listeners can get a great price on those training and racing packs, custom curated for Leadville racers. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for the race pack. And there's a link on that page to go to the training pack. And be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount on either of those boxes. Again, thefeed.com/Leadville and use the Leadville15 code at checkout. Fatty, here, if there's a Leadville of gravel racing, I think it would have to be Dirty Kansas. Now, that comparison may send some helmets spinning. But both, are leaders in the off-road endurance category. One gravel, one mountain bike. Kansas and gravel events in general have been struggling with their identities of sort. What started out as good-spirited rides with kind of loosey-goosey rules have also now become competitions. And when rides become races, people figure out how to win. Mm-hmm. And this year, Katie Kioff, a cyclocross rock star, won the women's edition of the DK200. Now, riding alongside her was her husband, Luke, a pro roadie with United Healthcare. Some of the women in contention at Kansas got a little contentious, accusing Katie of getting help, pacing that is, from her husband in a race, Kansas, that is supposed to be completely self-supported. Now, at Leadville, we see pacing all the time. Fatty and I have both done this. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to our experiences in a second. But the most notable act of pacing at Leadville was when Lance Armstrong put Fort Lewis College coach Matt Shriver on the front of the 2009 LT100 and had Matt turn the screws all the way to Twin Lakes, where Lance then took off for good. Fatty, was there any grumbling then or at any other time about racers at Leadville unhappy with someone being paced?
Well, I don't think was grumbling from the elite racers who were up front. There might have been some grumbling from those of us who were kind of unhappy with the way suddenly racers were getting in to the race without having to go through the lottery process. Back in the day, pros had to go through the lottery just like regular, weekend warriors like us were. I think there were a bunch of us who were a little sad that David Wiens didn't win, too. Even with all those wins under his belt, he was still kind of our guy. He was the scrappy underdog. He was our champion.
Well, we caught up with Dave Wiens to talk with him about just this, as well as race tactics anyone can use for a faster, better finish, whether they're pacing a friend, working with other racers, or just trying to not to blow up halfway through the race.
Dave, welcome to Leadville. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
You have won the Leadville 100 how many times?
6 times.
6 times. With inflation, I think we can increase that to 8. Right?
That's right.
So I wanted to go to the, for a normal competitor, for normal people who are showing up at this race and are just really caring about their own personal time, about getting across the finish line in the best possible time. What would be the advice that you would give to them?
Well, the advice I give to everybody is to pace very carefully, and then pace even more carefully than that. If you have that capacity, some people are pretty new to the sport and they just don't really have a solid understanding of what that means and what their limits are when they're pacing. I try to impress upon people how much enthusiasm there is at the start of that race. You've been thinking about it for months. You've been training for it. there's excitement in the air, and you're off, and you just coasted down a hill, and you're starting to ride. You feel pretty good. Of course you do. The race has just started, and a lot of people go way too hard in the beginning, and it's additionally difficult because all those enthusiastic people, if you're going to pace carefully, you might be getting passed by a lot of people thinking, what's wrong with me? I need to go faster. All these people are passing me. But I've always let people know that if you get passed by 150 people, if you pace carefully and you're strong all the way to the end, you're going to pass 400 or 500 in the end. So it doesn't matter what happens in any portion of the race. What happens is how it ends up. So that careful pacing is so important. And then if they're using the race itself for support or their drop bags, if people are worried about their cutoff times and things like that, and they're pretty close, they shouldn't languish in the aid stations. Get in there, get your stuff, and get your bike. Get your pocket stuff, whatever it takes. Refill your bottles, and get back on your bike and go. I don't think it's doing you any good to sit in a chair, for example. Yeah. Maybe, but I just don't see that. I see, you've trained to ride 100 miles. You're sitting down on your bike anyway. You might as well be sitting on your saddle pedaling as opposed to sitting in a chair going nowhere.
Yeah.
But the pacing part is really, really important. And I think that can make or break a lot of people's races. And it certainly does every year.
Dave, we've seen 6 hours broken now at Leadville. What do you think is possible there?
I think it would be possible to go a whole lot faster than that if you had bigger teams of strong riders. That was done with 3 or 4 guys working hard, and then they were alone probably at least a third of the race, if not longer. If you had, like the tour style teams where you had domestiques and, you had a bunch of guys up front who were really strong and a big group stayed together. I think that, but I don't know that's ever going to happen there. So, right. But you know what? Records continue to get pushed back. And there was a time when I was riding it when people were like, man, what would it be like to break 7 hours? And then, we broke 7 hours. It was like, whoa. And then now they've taken an hour out of that, an hour. So that leads me to believe that, more time can be taken out. Do
you have a number? Do you think 5.5 is possible?
Oh boy, that'd be cranking. I tell you what,
yeah.
You know what? I don't even know, but it just depends on. I think you'd have to have help. I don't think you'd ever get someone just time trial into that alone. It takes that group, and if you had a bigger group all the way back, I think you could make up some. I'm not saying it's impossible. That'd be remarkable.
Yeah, it would.
But I just don't know if we're going to see anything like that.
Where are the places where you think racers really should be looking for people to work together?
Well, and again, this is assuming that you are comfortable drafting, and several people in that field, they're not even comfortable drafting, I don't think. But I'd be looking for a wheel, obviously, from the start, rolling down the hill, the flats all the way across toward the bottom of St. Kevin's, and then. Really, if you're an experienced rider, you're looking for that wheel everywhere you can. Obviously, where it's faster and rockier and more technical, you're not going to be right on somebody's wheel, nor would you want to be. But you certainly want to try to, get on that wheel on all the paved sections, going down Turquoise Lake, around the lake, climbing back up on Hagerman Pass. It's a gravel road. It's a good place to be on a wheel. Certainly, the section between the bottom of Powerline and the pavement, the big I call it the big L, even though it's actually more like a Z, I guess. That goes from the bottom of the Powerline descent all the way to the Pipeline aid station. A lot of pavement in there, and usually pretty gusty winds in there. Great to be on a wheel there. But even that whole next section all the way to the base of Columbine, there's a draft to be had, and even going up Columbine, if you can be on somebody's wheel. Part of that too is just pacing. If someone is going a pace that's pretty good for you, or there's a group working and you're able to get into a group and take just a little tiny pull every now and then, or some people will just kind of end up cycling toward the back of a big group, and there might be 6 guys up front who never really want to relinquish those top 6 positions. They'll do all the work, and you've got this whole string of riders behind you that are just sitting on. So that's what I think is really so compelling about the Leadville 100 is, to me, it's a road race on mountain bikes.
Even though a lot of racers will show up there alone and feeling like they're alone, they won't be, and they'll find that out real quickly. Dave, is all they have to do is look around, and they'll find their peeps pretty soon. And it's probably a good idea, wouldn't you say, to find that group and stay with it as much as you can?
Absolutely. If you find a group or even a single rider or a couple riders that you're pretty well matched for, stick with them. And then as soon as they're starting to not go fast enough for you, or maybe you're starting to hurt a little bit trying to stay with them, you'll know, and it might be time to either fall back or to move up. But sometimes we get ambitious and we want to move up to the next group. But you can, the saying we like to use is burn matches, which is, basically you're using fuel, and you'll burn a few extra matches by bridging up to the next group. But if you're fit and you can back it up, you might be able to do that. And that's going to be how you might end up setting a PR or being able to meet your goals as far as your time. And maybe you didn't get a great lineup, or you had a poor start, and you find yourself having to ride out in the front on your own. But absolutely, find your people, as you say, and stick with them. But always being mindful of, is this a little too easy, a little too hard? Especially if it's a little too hard, you might want to back off and look behind you, and you might see a big group that's 40 meters behind you that you can fall back to those guys and get on with them for a while or something.
As someone who has exploded at mile 60 before, and who has also had pretty good days, that's a hard place to find. Do you have any tips or guidance for finding the pace that is going to work for you for 100 miles?
Well, yeah, it is so hard. And when I first started to do the Leadville 100, I never had raced 100 miles, so I didn't really understand it. And I would get on a climb and I'd say, okay, I think I can maintain this. And then I would back off from that, to where I was actually feeling a little bit silly sometimes going up some of the climbs. Like, man, I know I can ride harder than this. But by the end of the race, you can barely turn the pedals over. So that it was the right decision to do it that way. So I do think for inexperienced riders, it's hard, because automatically I think they just tend to go a little harder than they should. Yeah. It takes a lot of discipline to really ratchet it back and go slow. And I think an important idea for people to understand is how important it is that you're efficient at every step of the way. And think about the little ways that you can use extra energy that aren't helping you. For example, I know that men especially get into little mini battles with other guys, and I call them passing games. Like someone will pass you, and then you're like, oh, this guy's not going to pass me. I'm going to pass him, and then I'm going to pass him back. And you're just you're doing silly things, or someone will cut them off or something, and they'll start screaming and yelling, and the whole entire race is about efficiency from start to finish. You want to be as careful with your fuel resources and your energy as you can, and every bit of your energy needs to be put into driving the bike forward in an efficient way.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Fatty, thanks for having me on. Guys, Michael, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so that's Dave Wiens, the 6-time champion of the Leadville 100, and now he's the executive director for the International Mountain Bicycling Association, that's IMBA, and part-time racer for the Topi Gurgan racing team. Hottie, I have to say it kind of hurt to hear that he thinks having mixed categories pace each other is, as he says, kind of lame. One of my very proudest moments ever on the course was working with my wife to see if I could help her set a women's single-speed record in 2016, which I am proud to say she did.
Well, what do you think the woman whose record she broke, how do you think she felt about that?
Well, that was also my wife. Yeah, she broke her own record, so she's okay with it. But I get the point in a way, sort of. The thing is, that is how my wife and I train, riding together, working together, pacing each other. And increasingly, it's a way we enjoy racing. So since she and I have put a lot of time into becoming very well-matched racers, if it's not explicitly against the rules for her and me to compete together, I say there is no keeper of the flame who gets to tell us what the spirit of anything is. Our spirit is to ride together. And over the course of 8 years, we've become really good at it. So, that's kind of where I stand. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I think this is circling back to the top of this topic where Dirty Kansas kind of faced, some, I think, controversy. And it's probably because a husband was pacing his wife. Now, had it been another woman pacing Katie, would they have felt different? I don't know. Kansas, I think, needs to kind of flesh that out. I say just make the rules clear.
Yeah.
Either you allow pacing or you don't. I mean, clearly Leadville allows it, so fine. Grab a partner, do-si-do, right? I paced someone twice, a guy. We didn't have the success that you did, Fatty, but my man got on the podium, and that was nice. But I say all organizers, gravel, mountain, Grand Fondo, tricycle race, whatever, they need to be clear about they need to be clear about this. One person or persons helping another in the race.
Yeah. So moving away from that, one last little thing. This that you heard with Dave was about a third of the conversation we had with him. We'll be putting up a bonus episode this Friday with the full conversation. Lots of valuable information, great conversation. Be sure to watch your feed for it.
Hey, Fatty, what do you think about frame bags?
I've never had one. I guess I've just never done a ride big enough to feel like that justifies one. No overnight or backpacking type rides. But you just got one from Banjo Brothers, right?
Yeah. And I love frame bags. I can take everything I would put in my pockets and then some and put them in my frame bag. I like those half frame bags, especially the one I just got from Banjo Brothers. It's not even half, actually. It's more like a third of a frame, but there's still plenty of room for food, phone, wallet, extra tube. I can even slip my cool commuter mug in it.
Yeah, we've been going on and on in our little sponsor segment for Banjo Brothers about their seat bags for your race bike because I have a lot of them and I love them very much. But Banjo Brothers really specializes in super strong, affordable, practical bags for any kind of bike and really for almost any kind of occasion, commuter, bikepacking, racing, any kind of riding. They've got great backpacks and messenger bags for when you've got to carry bigger stuff too.
Yeah, that's Banjo Brothers, tough, practical, and affordable. Minneapolis-based, in business since 2003. Now, to get 15% off your order, go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Yeah, and you can get anything in their catalog for 15% off. That is not half bad. And I have to say, I just got a very nice commuter backpack. It's getting to be commuter weather here in Utah. We'll have to talk about that next episode. T-8 weeks. Oh, the butterflies are setting in. It is time for training tips with Trainer Roads coach Jonathan Lee. Jonathan, holy cow, 8 weeks. That's less than 2 months, man.
I know, right? And it's time to start ramping things up. If people turned it down last week, it's time to ramp it up again for the next 3 weeks. So chances are you're getting close to that threshold territory, and you're just going to, once again, be extending that time around then. So, yep. Yeah, it's get nervous time.
Let's hit the bottom line first. What should people be doing? Like if you are doing, what is your weekdays going to look like, and what is maybe your big day during the weekend might looking like?
Yeah, so it all depends on the normal routine that you can carry. The amount of stress that your body can take is the biggest thing you should be concerned with. Secondary to that is the amount of time you have available to train. So, and I just want to cover that really quick. When I talk about the amount of stress your body can take and why that's even more important than the time you can train is because a lot of us have really stressful jobs. Yeah. And let's say that, you have on your calendar, you have 8 hours to train, but maybe you can't actually effectively recover from 8 hours of training, right? It's more about making sure that, if you're sitting at your desk, that doesn't necessarily mean you're recovering. And if you have a really stressful job or home life, that doesn't necessarily mean you're recovering. So it's, if let's just say that you're following a low volume plan. So you're not training a whole lot. You're doing, 3 hours to 4 hours a week of structured stuff. Maybe you get out on the weekends when you can, right? In that case, I usually always recommend that folks do something like, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday sort of a thing. and maybe they throw on a Sunday, something like that. And then if that's the case, then your weekends, you can go out and you can do something a little longer. So that's usually what I recommend around this time.
How about for yourself? Like, as an example, what is your week going to look like?
Yeah, so my week will be, I don't train on Sundays. I train on Monday, then I train on Tuesday, then I train on Wednesday, and then I don't train on Thursday, and then I train on Friday and Saturday. So my training, though, usually it's on Monday, it's going to be 60 minutes. On Tuesday, it's going to be 90 minutes. On Wednesday, and Tuesday, a lot of the time I just substitute it for our local road race. And then I just have to keep in mind if that road race is a little too hard, then I just have to keep things a little bit easier the next day. But then Wednesday tends to be another day that's around the 90-minute mark. If I can, Thursday I rest. Then Friday is a 60 or 90-minute workout. In this case, it's probably going to be a 90. And then Saturday, I end up getting in usually somewhere around 2 to 3 hours. My Saturdays are packed, so tough to fit it in. But yeah, that's what my schedule looks like.
Okay, good template. Very good template. Jonathan, thanks for keeping us on track.
Chat soon.
Check out trainerroad.com for in-depth training plans and info, and you'll find their cool podcast there too. Yeah, and I wanted to say, shortly after recording this, Jonathan took a nasty crash and has messed up his knee pretty bad. I heard about this, of course, on their trainerroad.com podcast while I was on a ride. I guess probably not terribly ironically. I think that's where I listened about 90% of my podcast. But best wishes to Jonathan, and maybe we can get him on this show talking about how to recover in time from an injury to race the Leadville 100. Anyway, I'm hopeful and looking forward to him hopefully still being able to qualify in for this race. Mm-hmm. Yep. Good luck, Jonathan. Get better. Fatty, as we put the wraps on this one, we'd like to remind everyone that this podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Music, and the home site, Leadville100podcast.com. Subscribing, rating, reviewing us on your favorite Apple podcast in particular keeps this show going.
Yeah. And if you have ideas or questions for us, head over to the website's costume section. Yes, we have a section for costumes on our podcast.
That's right.
No, it is the comment section. Give us a little piece of your mind. And if you've got a question for the Queen or for Jonathan or for us, leave us a voicemail or text at 719-453-1514. And also you can follow me on Twitter at Fat Cyclist. Follow me on Strava, where I am Fat Cyclist. Or on Facebook, where I'm just plain old Eldon Nelson. I'm also back to posting on fatcyclist.com, so feel free to check us there. I always post the podcast there. So you can find all of our episodes and other stuff there too.
All right, everyone. Good luck in your training. Check your feed for a new episode next week, and we'll see you at the finish line.
8 weeks and counting, folks.